welcome to the Failing Up podcast. Today we're talking to Steve D from Rise. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what it's like to play and learn and win. Steve has some great experience in sports and is going to bring that knowledge in to talk to us a little bit more about how we can fail up and be successful and really define your purpose. So come and dive in with us.
Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Failing Up podcast, Humble Lessons in Life and Business. I'm joined here by my man, Dusty Oglesby, my co-host. Happy to have you, brother.
Good to be back. Good to be back.
And we're knocking these out.
Dusty Oglesby, right? Okay, good. Yes.
Yeah.
He's a big deal.
I know.
Come on.
Legend in his own mind. I love it.
All the way up from Texas.
That's right.
We had Texas. We had South Carolina.
From Texas. Flew in this morning. Talking about failure, I took 3 planes for American Airlines to get me here today. Three.
How many planes
The first one was broke. They didn't tell us why. The second one, it came to the gate and then it disappeared. And then literally, I think the third one, they just grabbed out of the bar and they were like, "We got one in a hangar coming." I'm like, "Is that our
So anybody here good with props?
best
awesome.
option?"
Yeah. Doesn't sound awesome.
Right? It was rough.
Yeah. I always love it when you're out there. Like, as soon as the techs get through de-thawing that piece, the tech equipment on the plane, you're ready to take off. I'm like, this doesn't sound like it's going to go well.
Not at all. Yeah.
All right. Here with our amazing guest, Mr. Stevie D. How are you, brother?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I always have to say Steve D because tell me your last name again. You've done it like 4 million times.
De La Veaga.
Easy.
Because it's each syllable's pronounced. Now, as a guy I was like in a kindergarten. My dad was a freak about our name. Yeah. So what do you learn in kindergarten? You capitalize the last letter of your last name.
Yeah.
That's right.
So he made the mistake of looking at, I go, "Dad, I got an A." And first he looks at the name and he goes, "You can't spell your own goddamn name." And sat me down. I had to write 250 times, small D-E space, capital L-A-V-E-A-G-A.
Yeah.
250 times. Now when you're a kid, that was felt like it took me a day.
De La Veaga. Is that right?
That's it.
De
There
La
you go.
Veaga.
Now you got it. Perfect.
I'll practice it in the shower.
I've been running with Steve D too.
Yeah,
That
Steve's
works
right.
out
We
better
all
for me.
kind of
It's easy, brother. It's easy.
It is. Thanks for joining us here.
Sure.
You and I haven't talked much about what the podcast even is. You're just in town and graced us with your presence. So thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us.
Of course.
Really what we're after here for our listeners has been, Dusty and I were talking about, there's a lot of podcasts out there about how great we are and our successes. And we've realized that a lot of the reason we've had success is through all the failures.
That's right.
And so we want to try to be a little bit more transparent with people who've built big businesses and really understand failure. So let's start off with, help us out. When you think of failure, what does that mean to you?
For me, having played a sport, I think helps because I did play 10 years of professional basketball, 4 years in college, 4 years in high school. And you miss a lot of shots. Right? And you have a lot of times where your play or a play you made cost your team a game. And you had to read about it, see it on TV, read about it in the paper. So you had to learn early on that. And I had a really good mentor. I got a chance to play for Coach Riley for a period of time at the Lakers. And he would always say, it's the ability to get up. If you remember, he tells a great story about Magic Johnson. They called him Tragic Magic after the first finals against the Celtics where he dribbled out the clock.
Right.
And then he turned the ball over in the backcourt when Boston had no chance to win. And he said that could have been, you could have never heard of him again. He could have pouted and gone. Instead, came back, won 3 MVPs and won 5 titles in the 80s.
Wow.
And so for me, failing is actually, I always go, good. This was an awful executed result. But I can tell you what I did learn. The first 2 things we did in the process were fine. 3 and 4 were iffy, and 5 through 9 we're going to chuck out and start over.
Right.
And when you learn that it's either win or learn, it's not win or lose. That's all it comes down to.
I love that.
I love, my whole thing is always, and our team knows that we had our call this morning, our leadership team, 15 people, and I said, hey, what was the learn this month?
Yeah.
And it had to be, you did something poorly.
Right.
There was a bad financial, bad client, really bad result, but you promised me you learned it. Now, the challenge is, Dave, as you know, and you guys all lead and coach people,
right.
If it's the same thing 2 or 3 months in a row,
That's right.
then we start to have a different problem.
That's right.
You're not learning.
Failing forward's okay. Learning's okay.
That's
But
right.
if you do it again, I said, well, how's that different than last month that we thought we learned that lesson?
That's right. Yeah.
And then we do the same thing with our kids. You all have kids. When you raise kids, especially boys, you want them to get flesh wounds, not mortal
That's right.
wounds, but
That's
flesh
right.
wounds, because they'll never forget those lessons.
Yeah, it comes down to the pain, right? I think that's part of it, right? If you continue the behavior, right? The pain hadn't been great enough for you to change the behavior.
100%.
Right? You talk about Magic Johnson. That's pain, right?
Oh.
The whole world watching, right?
Tragic magic.
That's
Larry
right.
does it again.
That's right. So here it is, right, everywhere. And that level of pain, right, is what, I mean, we're all driven by that, right? We're going to run away from the pain. And so
And you talk
think
about
that's
how
the key
much
of
can
it.
you take, and especially when it comes to kids. One of my ahas, we call our oldest one our first pancake, right? 'Cause you just first pancake doesn't always turn out quite right, and they don't give you a book, right?
That's
Like,
good. No.
and so you
Character.
you do learn through, like, I'm not trying. For a while, it was how do I prevent them from being hurt, right? Or how do I jump in and save them? And then
right.
you realize, like, well, that's what builds character, though, right?
That's
And
right.
so it's not how do I keep you from getting hurt? It's how do I keep you from going way off the rails, right? How do I make sure that you manage that hurt appropriately,
That's right.
That you learn how to respond to it.
That's right.
I think that's what we've talked about this. You know, there's so many catchy bumper stickers about failure, and you go like, man, it doesn't feel real funny or catchy when you're face first on the mat,
No.
right? When you just gotten knocked out, or you talk about, right? I mean, being in that moment to learn. There's a lot of emotion around that, especially when it's public like that. You talk about with sports or whatever. That
The
public
other thing
failure
I
hurts.
think you guys, I see you both do it. I've listened to you speak, Dusty, many times. Own it.
That's right.
Just stand up and say, I was awful.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I get to be in some meetings with GK a little bit now, and nothing's worse than when someone's trying to explain
That's right.
away the
You hurt
the
for 'em,
reason
right?
it didn't work, and
Yeah.
you're like, he's like, Steve, why didn't that work? Because I was awful at it.
That's
Completely
right.
my fault. You know what he does? He goes, all right, next
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Now, those guys that keep trying to explain it
That's right.
or excuse it, just own it. Say,
That's right.
I own it, my fault.
Yeah.
That same thing will not happen again. We might lose again, but it won't be that way.
That's
Well,
right.
I love it,
Yeah.
but you got to be able to take it and do something with it, right? I've got a couple of people that I've worked partnerships with, and they'll own it. They'll almost own it too fast,
Right.
You know,
That's right.
and I'm like, well, we got to do something with that, right? Like, you can't just keep coming back and well, that's
right.
on me.
Well,
Okay, but like, how are we going to make sure this doesn't happen again
Well,
next
I
time?
hate
That's
the
right.
words I'm sorry. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you sorry for? Did you purposely screw this up?
That's right.
No?
Yeah.
Then you don't say sorry. Say, I own this.
That's right.
Here was the miss.
That's right.
Here's what I'm going to do starting next week, and I'll give you the outcome in
That's right.
3 to 4 weeks. Okay. Now, as a leader, would you say that ends your conversation?
Well,
All right.
100%, right? Because it's the behavior change piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the purpose room, we talk about RUT ABC. It's recognize the wrong. Like, hey,
Ooh, well done.
this was me,
I like that.
right? I just recognize the wrong. I'm gonna own it. It's not I'm sorry. It's I recognize it. That's different.
Very different.
Right? Everybody in the world, everybody on the planet says I'm sorry. The you is you got to understand the pain, because there's pain that was caused to me, to you, to other people that we don't even know, and then you take the responsibility, right? Then you ask for forgiveness. That's a whole other ball game.
Yeah.
Because somebody can say, no, I don't forgive
Right,
you,
right.
right? And a lot of times, then that forgiveness comes from the behavior change. To your point, right, Steve? Now,
Well, sometimes
now we
you
have the
earn
behavior
forgiveness,
change.
right?
That's
might not-
exactly
Hey,
right.
you cost me $40,000. I'm not ready to forgive on
That's
Monday.
right. That's right. Give me some time.
6
Show me
weeks from
something
now,
different.
and I'm starting to throw some money back in there, and I'm starting. That's why there's no.
That's right.
You've ever sold somebody a house that didn't quite have the equity the same way in a year that you hoped it would or it might?
Yeah, sure.
But you can hang in there and be like, hey, I've learned something. Stay with me on this. And time tends to, if you've
right.
learned,
That's right.
time has allowed you to get better for the next one. That's the first person you call when you go, hey, now I do have something. I've been doing this now 6 years.
That's
This
right.
one over here.
That's
I want
right.
to give you first shot at it.
That's right. Yep.
All right, so talk to us about something that's going on right now in your life, or maybe in the last 6 months, where you've failed and you can kind of look back and see. I guess it could be a year ago, 2 years ago, but at the moment it felt pretty crummy. But now you can kind of look back and see where it navigated you.
I think as you're listening, and your listenership's probably a combo of single agents, people running small teams, people running big teams, big business.
Right.
Managing up is an absolute skill. You might know exactly what you're doing in your business and how you're doing it, but your shareholders, your partner peers, you're managing up as a skill. And again, having worked at places where I'm managing to a public board, or to someone like Mr. Foley, who owns the Golden Knights, and every meeting I had over 4 minutes, nothing after 4 minutes was ever good. It was a butt chewing, right?
Right.
So being able to explain up things that we might take for granted, that we know this is just how you run this team or run this
That's right.
level 8, or I've learned to say, okay, here's the roadmap we have, and here's what worked, and here's why it worked. People say, well, you should close more houses, Steve. You should have more Rise clients. I'm like, in comparison to what?
Right.
What's the churn rate with technology in today when the real estate market's gone down? Oh, it's north of 65, 70%. If our churn rate's at 34%, although we'd like it to be better, that's 100% improvement on the overall churn rate.
That's right.
So now what, right? So I learned to manage up by failing to not do that. When someone would go, well, I think you should have more sales, I'm like, I'm the best sales guy in the world. No context, no data around it. So I would say, as you're sitting out there, remember, everybody's got a boss, whether it be clients, partner, board, CEO. Learn to manage up by giving information and data that allows them to have the knowledge you have as to whether you're winning, losing, or treading water.
That's right. Yeah.
I think it's critical as business owners that we're spending time really focused on having a plan and creating a plan. You're right. You talk about context. One of the things as a coach that I always come back to with my clients is, well, show me where that was in the plan, right? Because as agents, we tend to see shiny objects or chase down new and exciting ideas. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but ultimately it's show me where that was in the plan. If the plan was to get to X result and that gets you closer to your goal, then let's continue that conversation. If it doesn't, it may just be something that's sidetracking you, right? And I love what you're saying about managing up. As you start to invest in people, right, and develop people more, you realize that someone helped you along the way. I had somebody call me or send me a text the other night, and I can't believe that this is happening. And I'm like, welcome to leadership, right? It's late on a Friday night, and you're going to hear from them. And how do you grow that, right? Because who you were 20 years ago is so different than who you are now.
And people you interact with at a higher level. I mean, we got some of our guys seeking investment. Goldman Sachs, H funds. If you don't manage up that relationship, it gets very crooked very fast. Let me ask you guys a question. You mentioned a great point. When do you pivot, right? You're coaching someone. I think in real estate, we got people that pivot every 4 weeks.
Right.
Not good.
Right.
People that don't ever pivot because their experience is, I do this most of the way I do it forever, and they go 12 months and they've wasted months of money. When do you coach someone to pivot in a business, and what do you look for that tells you now's our time?
You want to take that one?
I'm going to you first. And
You're
then
going to
I'll
go. Yeah. Again, I come back to ultimately, if you understand their why, and you understand the plan to help them deliver for whatever. Usually the plan's outcome has some impact on the why. And so if you're going to continue to do the same thing and not pivot, that tells us something.
That's right.
My favorite coaching question is, where else is this showing up in your life? Right. And so as you're continuing to do the wrong things and not get the result, where else could that be showing up? Could that be showing up with your children? Could that be showing up with your spouse? How can we look at this and go, let's remove all the emotion from it. Let's understand what the target is because of that why, right? Or because of whatever we were doing to drive that outcome or that result, so that we could deliver that time with our children or time with our spouse or whatever it is.
That's right.
And is this feeding that? It's amazing as agents we get so stuck to an idea and we just won't let it go. The interesting, because Sajid gets on me, my coach, a lot about comparison, right? He's like, why do you care what everybody else is doing? Like, stop asking, but I think we all do it, right? And it's like, well, if they can do it, I want to do it, right? And I want to know how they did it. Almost to a fault though, because ultimately it's like, well, is that feeding my end game, right? It's back to Gary's forever number, right? If you don't know what you want, he's kind of boxed you in when it comes to wealth building.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Because his definition of wealth is getting what you want so that it gives you the life that you want when you want it, right?
That's right.
And so if you don't know what you want, therefore now you can never be wealthy.
That's right.
This is why experience is one of the worst traits during transition or change. Because we cling so passionately to what we think we know and it's always worked for us. Even as the market, within real estate, you can't outrun the market. The market moves, you better move a little with it. How do you coach someone, Dustin, when you're like, okay, we're now 90 days in, you've done the da-da-da, our result's not there. When do you coach pivot?
So and the way I look at it with two words, really. It's alignment and purpose, right? And that's what David just talked about, really. If we don't know why we're going somewhere, and we don't know where we're going. Okay, so that's like we can't even go anywhere anyway.
Then you're always lost or always there.
That's
One
right.
of the two.
That's right. Right. So we got to identify where are we, why are we doing this, right? What's the purpose behind it? And so that's where purpose comes in, and then basically looking and going, okay, are you in alignment with your purpose. I look at it as, Steve, what I coach a lot is the 1 degree method, right? Like the like pilots,
this.
right? If
If
the nose of your plane is off 1 degree, you will not land where you're going.
Not even close.
Right?
And the longer the destination, the more lost you are.
That's right. It won't be a big deal in the beginning, right?
No.
So when we look at a 30, 60, 90, I think the reason we do that is go, look, if we're off here in 30 days, you may not think it's a big deal. In 6 months, it's going to be a big dadgum deal.
Good for you.
Right? And now, right, to course correct, people think you just go, oh, well, then I'll just go back to here. No, you got to course correct 1 degree.
Yes, sir.
Right? Maybe 2. You don't just go, right? Like if a plane's going the wrong direction, it doesn't just go, no, we'll go that way now.
Just didn't hit hard left.
That's going to be painful for everybody.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think that's where leaders make the mistake, right? That their degree's been off so long that now we're completely out of alignment. They've had no coaching to keep them in alignment. And now they want to turn the whole thing as fast as possible. And all that's going to do is people are going to
rattles the crew.
Everybody's
rattles
going.
the passengers.
That's right.
Everybody's yeah.
I think that the best advantage of having truly talented people around you is that my superpower is recognizing that I'm not really that great at anything, but being around great people. When you give them the capacity to self-correct, right? As long as we're all able to have that conversation together about the failure. Bethany told a great story about getting comfortable failing within my organizations and learning that was going to be okay. And then watching them come up with the solutions. To me, it's the most obvious, finder of talent is that when we make mistakes and when we have to pivot and you back up and go, okay, so what, now what? Right? Like, what are we moving on to?
That's right.
You do this ridiculously well. I'd like to know where you learned it. He asks really good questions.
Great questions.
And doesn't give the answer the way Google would be. Hi, Dave,
right.
What should we do? What do you think? I've never heard you go, yeah, no, hire Jim and do this. You always go, well, so when did you learn to answer questions with questions so you made them think, not just you?
Yeah, I wish I had an answer for that. I have no idea. Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Because when we're young, we tend to want, I have the answer.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
smart,
right.
ask me. And then when you get older, you realize, I'm going to become Google.
Yeah, well, I always, I think we all kind of look back and kind of self-analyze and growing up a lot. My mom worked 3 jobs. I was the man of the house, even though I was the youngest. But I remember, working 2 jobs when I was 13, taking my mom's car without her knowing. Is that a better way than stealing?
Borrowing.
I'm going to say that's probably stealing.
I was going to say,
It's my
borrowing
mom's.
without going to jail.
Right.
So
You can
whatever
call it what you want to.
But borrowing her car to go pick up groceries, and she worked a lot, right? And so but we didn't have a whole lot of and so I think you just kind of figure out along the way that and that's what we come back to kids, and you go, you see so many successful people that don't come from a successful background, and I think because at some point you have to take the cover off and go, I'm not special. And if I want to make it, I'm going to have to just grind it out, right? I'm just going to have to get really good at doing whatever it is I'm doing. I'm going to do more effort than anybody else.
What keeps me up at night, I'd be curious. You both have kids, right?
Yeah.
What kept me up at night is, and I'm similar to you, I was raised by a single mom. We had no money. So my mom was tough love when you were 12 years old, told you the rules.
Yeah. Right.
Now, our kids did not grow up that way.
Right.
Mom never worked. We were affluent. I used to stay up at night going, I'm scared, because I read a book that of the 127 self-made billionaires in America in the last century, not one of their children grew their fortune. Not one.
Wow.
And so what scares us is, how do we spoil them, which we're going to do, but not
That's right.
entitle them
That's right.
to do that? That's the job as the parent. Unfortunately, it's hard.
That's
One
right.
of the things we've talked about this. I mean, I love to bring my kids along on the journey. There was a moment in time where I thought I needed to shut it all off before I walked in the door, so that they didn't feel like Dad was not giving them the full attention. And I've had that conversation with my boys of like, look,
That's right.
I can either remove myself from the family and go work, or we can just learn to coexist, because this is what I do. And I've had a general rule. My youngest one has 8 more years till he graduates, and I won't stop working until they're out of the house, right? They should see Dad working every day. They should see me getting up, whoever it is, Mom, Dad,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know we're running short on time here. I'd love to ask, Steve, if you think to the end, right, and you're thinking back over your life, what are you concerned the biggest regret's going to be?
Well, I was blessed. I worked for Coach Wooden for 4 years in college, right? And if you've ever read his Pyramid of Success, it's the greatest philosophical teaching for athletes who aren't super smart. And the top of the pyramid says, have no regrets. Live with the fact that you became the best you were capable of becoming through hard work, dedication, and a consistent focus of better. And the reality is, I look back and go, I want to sit on that rocking chair when I'm 89 years old and go, as good a player as I could be, as good a leader as I could be, as good a dad as I can be. And if you listen to Gary in his leadership podcast with Molly the other day, he wants his wife to turn to him and go, we had a good life, didn't we?
Yeah.
Wants his kid to turn to him on, Dad, he goes, Dad, we had a good life, didn't we?
That's it.
You just want to look back and go, did you do the best to become the best you were capable of becoming? That's the whole journey.
Yeah.
And I love that, because if you look at life in 3 month or 6 month or 12 month snippets, it's hard. It's stressful. You're battling, right? You're grinding. Yet if you can back out, and because when you back out, you remove all the stuff that really doesn't matter.
Correct.
Right.
That's right.
And I always say, like, I can probably tell you on October 10th, I was probably frustrated by something, irritated by something. Something wasn't going my way. I don't know what it was, but I can tell you, the first 2 weeks of October, I spent time traveling the country with my children, and we went hiking together. And so it's being able to zoom out. I heard the best thing the other day, and we'll kind of wrap up on this. It was anxiety isn't, relaxed isn't the opposite of anxiety or anxious, right? Being present is the opposite of anxiousness, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're feeling anxious, trying to make yourself feel relaxed is actually going to add to that anxiety, because you're going to recognize that you're not relaxed. You're not how you should be doing.
Right.
Yet if you'll stop and realize that just being present will allow you to just, and I find myself now driving down the road and just, I'm getting old, right? Because I'm like,
easy there, young.
Look at the trees, right? Like look at the cows, right? I'm just, it's just trying to be present where you are, and it's such a great medicine, right? Yeah. For our fast-paced, busy life. Steve, thank you so much for being here, brother.
My pleasure. Good to be here. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, likewise, man.
Absolutely, man. That was incredible.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.